Okay, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving into the mind of Robert Kiyosaki.
Oh yeah, he's a firecracker, that's for sure.
No mincing words with this guy. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that's Kiyosaki's claim to fame, right?
Absolutely. The book that launched 1,000 personal finance journeys. And he's been stirring the pot again recently.
Yeah, I heard he did this big interview in India, of all places.
That's actually really interesting. It shows how his message is resonating globally, especially in places experiencing rapid economic change. But we'll get back to that.
Right on. So, for those who haven't read Rich Dad, Poor Dad yet, what are the key takeaways from Kiyosaki's work?
In a nutshell, Kiyosaki is all about financial education. He truly believes that traditional schools drop the ball when it comes to equipping people with real-world money skills.
He's not a fan of the education system, then.
Let's just say he has strong opinions. He actually tells this fascinating story about asking his own father for financial advice as a kid. And get this, his dad was a highly educated man. But instead of giving practical tips, he basically just gave a sermon about money being the root of all evil. The whole spiel.
Oh, wow, I've heard that one before.
Right. It's this ingrained belief system that Kiyosaki believes keeps people stuck. By not teaching practical money skills, he argues that schools are essentially creating a workforce that's financially dependent.
Ah, so this is where his whole fake money concept comes in.
Exactly. When Kiyosaki says fake money, he means fiat currency, the kind that's not backed by gold or other tangible assets.
So he sees traditional money as inherently unstable.
You got it. And he's gone so far as to call teachers criminals for perpetuating this system.
Whoa, criminals is a strong word. What's the thought process there?
It goes back to the idea of schools failing to prepare students for the real world. Kiyosaki sees it as a form of, well, economic oppression.
It makes you wonder how much of our financial literacy actually came from school versus, like, lived experience. Did our schools really prepare us to build wealth?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's get back to Kiyosaki. This whole rigged system idea seems connected to his recent trip to India, doesn't it? Why India?
It's not random, that's for sure. Kiyosaki sees India as a powerhouse on the global stage, especially with its young and ambitious workforce. He views it as a nation with a less rigid financial system compared to what he sees as the failing structures in the West.
So he's looking at India from a different angle, seeing potential where others might not. And this is the same interview where he kept pushing silver as the investment to watch, right? What's the connection there?
Right, so Kiyosaki, he sees traditional money, that fiat currency we were talking about, as, well, fake money. He views tangible assets, particularly gold and silver, as real money, a hedge against what he sees as inevitable inflation.
So it's all connected to his "the world as we know it is ending" narrative.
Precisely.
Okay, I have to admit, that part always makes me a little uneasy, but it's clear he believes in what he's saying.
He's certainly not afraid to make bold claims. And a lot of it is rooted in distrust of traditional institutions.
That's a good point. It's about taking control.
Right. Don't rely on the system, build your own safety net. That's pure Kiyosaki. Now, whether you agree with his methods or not, there's something to be said about self-reliance and being prepared, especially in today's world.
Absolutely. But remember, everyone, this is just one perspective.
Exactly. Don't make any rash financial decisions based on what you hear here. Always do your homework.
Always good advice. But Kiyosaki, he doesn't shy away from controversy. And his comments about Biden were pretty direct.
To say the least. Calling him the biggest criminal he'd ever seen is quite a statement, even for Kiyosaki.
Yeah, he didn't hold back. So what's the story there? What's fueling that level of animosity?
Well, it all goes back to one of Kiyosaki's fundamental beliefs, capitalism, and his deep-seated suspicion of any government meddling in the economy. So we were talking about Kiyosaki's, well, let's just say, interesting thoughts on President Biden.
He really went there, didn't he? Calling Biden the biggest criminal he had ever seen. That's a pretty serious accusation, even for someone as outspoken as Kiyosaki. What's the source of that kind of animosity?
It all goes back to Kiyosaki's unwavering belief in capitalism. He's deeply skeptical of government intervention in the economy.
Right, he's always been a big proponent of free markets.
Exactly. And he sees Biden's policies, particularly those related to taxes and regulation, as being very much anti-capitalist.
And that's what really sets him off.
It's a major sticking point for him. He views these policies as direct attacks on economic freedom and individual liberty. He actually pointed to the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline as a prime example.
Oh, right. He brought that up, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And remember, Kiyosaki, he has a background in the oil industry himself, so he sees that decision as a huge blow to American energy independence and a clear case of government overreach.
So it's about more than just pipelines for him. It's symbolic of a larger pattern he sees in government policy.
Absolutely. And it ties into his larger worldview, his distrust of centralized systems, which is interesting because he then makes this passionate case for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and he kept saying Bitcoin has more integrity. I wasn't quite sure what he meant by that.
He's talking about the technology underpinning Bitcoin, the blockchain. It's about transparency, immutability. He trusts the technology more than he trusts, well, people.
So for Kiyosaki, it's less about Bitcoin as a currency and more about what it represents, a move away from centralized control.
Exactly. It's about individual empowerment, taking your financial future into your own hands.
Yeah.
And you can't underestimate how Kiyosaki's own life experiences have shaped these views.
Right. He flew helicopters in Vietnam. The guy's seen a lot.
That kind of experience stays with you. It makes you think differently about risk, about preparedness.
He seems to connect those experiences to the slums he's visited all over the world. He claims he's even seen similar situations becoming more common in the U.S.
He does. He's painting a picture of a future where those who haven't taken control of their financial lives could be left behind.
It's a stark warning, that's for sure. But even if you don't buy into the whole doomsday scenario, are there still valuable lessons we can take from Kiyosaki's message?
Oh, absolutely. At its core, his message is about taking responsibility for your financial well-being. It's about becoming financially literate, understanding how money works.
It's about becoming your own financial advocate. But how do we do that? There's so much information out there. Where do you even begin?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something we'll delve into as we continue this deep dive. Kiyosaki has very specific ideas about what constitutes true financial education.
Oh, I'm intrigued. I think it's time we moved beyond the doom and gloom and get into some practical advice. So, how does Kiyosaki suggest we actually go about building wealth, achieving financial freedom?
We'll get ready for this. It all comes down to one word: assets.
Assets. Okay, I think I see where this is going. He's all about building a portfolio of income-generating assets, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
And he has some strong opinions on which ones are the most valuable.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Kiyosaki's views on education, his distrust of those traditional financial systems, even his thoughts on where the world's headed. But let's bring it home for our listeners. What's the action plan? What does he actually recommend people do about all this?
Well, it really boils down to one core concept: building a portfolio of income-generating assets.
Assets, assets, assets. That's his big thing.
It's the cornerstone of his strategy. He sees it as the key to breaking free from that rat race he always talks about. It's about reaching that point where your money is working for you instead of the other way around.
Makes sense. But he's not talking about just any assets, is he? He has his favorites, right?
No, absolutely. Remember how much emphasis he puts on tangible assets.
Right, stuff you can actually touch.
Exactly. Real estate.
Yeah.
That's his bread and butter. He loves it for the cash flow potential, the appreciation. He always talks about how his early investments in rental properties really set him on the path to wealth.
That's classic rich dad thinking, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a core part of his own story and something he still preaches today. And it's not just about massive developments. He's also a fan of smaller scale investments, rental properties even. Believe it or not, parking spaces.
Parking spaces. Okay, now that's a new one.
It's all about thinking outside the box, finding those unconventional ways to generate that passive income, no matter how small it might seem at first.
Interesting. So real estate, and of course we can't forget about his love affair with precious metals. He's always been a gold bug.
Oh, absolutely. Gold, silver. He sees those as a safe haven, especially in times of economic turmoil. It's a hedge against inflation, which he sees as practically inevitable with the way traditional currencies are managed.
So essentially he's saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, diversify your portfolio.
Exactly. But for Kiyosaki, it goes beyond physical assets. He's also a huge advocate for investing in, yourself.
Investing in yourself? What does that even look like?
For him, it's about constantly learning, expanding your financial knowledge, picking up new skills, developing that entrepreneurial mindset.
So it's not just about what you own, it's about what you know. It's about becoming your own financial expert.
Exactly. It's about taking control of your financial destiny.
And that brings us back to that thought-provoking question we posed earlier. If you were to build your ideal asset portfolio today, what would that look like? What would give you that sense of true financial freedom that Kiyosaki's always talking about?
It's a great question to ask yourself. Even if you don't agree with everything Kiyosaki says, it forces you to really define what financial freedom means to you.
Maybe it's rental properties, maybe it's a stock portfolio, maybe it's investing in your own education or business. Whatever it is, the important thing is to have a plan, to start taking those steps toward building that financial future that you envision for yourself.
And hey, maybe this deep dive into the world of Robert Kiyosaki will spark some ideas and inspire some action.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the mind of Robert Kiyosaki. We'll see you next time when we'll be tackling another fascinating and thought-provoking topic.